Hi, my name is Mike Brightman. My company is Brightman Designs, and we offer design, drafting, visualization, and workflow training services. And today what I wanted to do is kind of get you jump-started on how to enter this Lumion summer competition for students. So keep in mind that you do need to use the Lumion free version for students, and also you're going to need to submit this your entry by September 5th, 2016, and this contest or this competition is only available for students in the United States. So with that said, what we really need to do is track down an iconic building. So the design challenge is to reimagine an iconic building, any iconic building. So if you think it's iconic, that's great. Just reimagine it and submit it. So it could be a known architectural building, or I don't know, use your imagination. We're kind of loose on that, but I'm going to pick kind of a very distinct or obviously iconic building, and that would be Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright. So the first thing I want to do, though, is track that down on the 3D warehouse. So it's pretty easy to find some really nice models on the SketchUp's 3D warehouse. So there's a lot of geo models on there, just kind of simple shells of buildings that are very easily adjusted and rendered. Or you could always build your own, or just kind of work off pictures. So it really doesn't matter. You know, with this competition, you could either change the look of the actual building, or you could just kind of use design elements and reimagine it. As long as you have justification, I think you're good. So what we'll do is hop into SketchUp, and I'm going to first go to the File dropdown and choose 3D Warehouse, Get Models. So under File, 3D Warehouse, I choose Get Models, and then I'm going to type in Falling Water. Hit Enter to search. Okay, so now here's all my search results. Now I'm going to sort by the most liked. And when I do that, it brings this model up to the top. This one by Google GeoModels. Now, the thing about the 3D warehouse is that anyone can submit a 3D model here. So you're going to get all kinds of different stuff. It could be like a big square, a big block that says, this is falling water. But if you want something that's maybe a little more trustworthy, that's properly proportioned and textured in a nice way, look for something built by Google GeoModels. Those are the ones that go directly into Google Earth. I know they've got a bunch of iconic buildings under their collections, and maybe other than that, you just need to like search around and just look at the model. So Google GeoModels, though, those models were built by Google for Google Earth, and those are lightweight, well textured, and will work well for what we're doing here. So we're going to grab this model. I'm going to click on Download, and I'm going to load this one directly into my SketchUp model. You can see that I've got my Condoc default template here. So that is available. We're going to make that available on the files zip. So on our tutorial page, you'll be able to grab all those, this model, the template, and all that stuff to get it all installed and make your screen look just like mine. Okay, so here's Falling Water. Looks pretty good, but there's a few things about this model that we're going to need to work on. So first off, let me turn off my shadows. I'm just going to click on Design. So that's one thing about this template, is we can just click on Design, gets us to like a really light and snappy place to work. A few things about this. One is we really need to transition this from a geo model into a render-ready model. Now what I mean by that is that in a geo model, the detail of a building is represented in the photos and the photo textures. So there's no actual like depth to the surfaces. Whereas in a render-ready model, we're going to trace over the photographs, and then we're going to assign depths to the window frames and the different, anything that has an in or an out, we'll make sure to add a depth to it. Okay, so let's do that in SketchUp. We're going to go in here to these windows here. Now, the first thing we need to do is kind of double-click in. You can see that, this is our first group. And when I look in here, I'm not seeing any of the edges. You can see that they're kind of hidden. So what I could do is just go to Edit and choose Unhide All. Now when I unhide, you can now see these edges. So that's common with a geo model, is that you would hide the edges so they don't show up in Google Earth. But we want to see them, so we'll just unhide them as we go. You can kind of clean things up as we move along, but what I'm going to do here is take this edge and I'm going to make a copy of it to the very bottom here and let it overlap on this edge, and then I'm going to type in I think it's probably like 18 divided by, and then that way I can put 18 divisions and kind of make an equal copy here. So watch this. I'll just tap with my move tool, I click once to pick it up, tap Control, and then move it straight down on my blue axis, and then I'll type 18 divided by Enter. And you can see that 18 equal divisions runs that right through. Now, I already counted them, so that's easy for me, but you just need to count whatever you're working on and figure that out. So now I can see that I've got this one to move straight down by 18 inch, or by what was that? The window actually ended up being like 1'4". So we're not too hung up on the actual clean dimensions of it, so that's okay. I'll get rid of these guys just to kind of clean this up. And now we've got this one chunk of geometry up here. So in SketchUp, what we're doing to make this into a render-ready model, we're looking for repeating elements to turn into components. That way we can really make this a much smarter model, so that if we update one piece of it, the rest of it updates. So for instance, this corner window, or this wraparound corner window, is a repeating element. So we're going to make that a component and then copy that down, so that'll make a much more efficient model. Let's do that. All right, so here I've got my two windows selected. I can right-click and choose, I like to just say Make Group. I make it a group and then I make it a component. That way I don't have to name my components. I really don't like naming them, but maybe you do, so that's okay. You could just call it like Window A and then keep up with that. But for me, I just want it to be a component, and I don't care what the name is. Now these two pieces here, I really need to get rid of those, but watch what happens if I hit delete. When I hit delete, it trashes all of this stuff too. So a little trick that I use a lot is I would select these two. I'd make it a group first, and I have a keyboard shortcut, G. You could always right-click and choose Make Group and then delete. That way, it's going to leave behind the edges that I need to maintain these other surfaces that are attached to it. All right, so here's my window component. I'll make a copy of it, and I'm going to say 17x, Enter. So now I've got 17 of those components copied down. Now, I'll go in here with my Select tool, and let's edit this. So I'm going to make an offset here of 2 inches, and I'll make another offset here. I can just double click. So now we've got an offset at 2 inches. Maybe I'll make a copy of this edge here, straight over by, we'll call it like 25 inches, and maybe make a copy of this at like 2 inches. All right, so we've got all the surfaces kind of broken up as we needed them to. Now let's push this back by 2 inches. Again, with my push-pull tool, I have a memory, so I can double-click. And now what I need to do is assign some materials. So I'll go to my Paint Bucket tool under my, let's see, glass and mirrors, and I'll go with this kind of gray glass. So we'll apply our glass first, and you can see what's happening here. All of our textures are updating. So all of our textures in each of our components are updating. All right, now we want to add a material that looks kind of like this red here. So let me go to my colors, and I'll just grab whatever color, I don't care. And then I'm going to hold Shift. This is I want to apply this material to my frames. Now, instead of clicking on each and every surface to add that, let's undo that. I'm going to add a new texture, and let's just kind of make it something, and then click on Edit. Now I want to match this material to this color. So what I can do is click on this Match Color on Screen and click there. So now we've got that material set up. It's our active material. I could even call that like Brightman Designs underscore metal frame, or PT01. That's a good one too if you're gonna make a material schedule. Okay, so that looks good. Now what I was getting at before is instead of clicking on each one of these surfaces, I can hold Shift and click, and that does kind of a material swap. So check that out. Those are some pretty quick and easy shortcuts for getting through that task pretty quickly. All right, so what I would do is I would just kind of continue on to clean this thing up. I think I would also want to find a different material here for this rock. You can see that geomodels are typically they're really optimized for Google Earth, so they have like really lightweight textures which don't always render perfectly. But no problem, we just need to swap them out with something a little more high res. You could always go to Google Images, do a search like stack stone, texture, tileable, or repeating. Those are good search words to find textures. But for me, I already have one. I can sort this out. I can go to the Edit tab. So the way that I found that real quick is with my Paint Bucket tool active, I held down Alt and clicked on that material. So you can see that that will make the material that you sample the active current material. So now I'll just click on our texture image path, and we're going to go to our Dropbox under resources, and I've got a whole bunch of materials in here under stone, and we've got this kind of seamless stone wall. That's one that I just grabbed off of a Google image search. Now you can see that that one did not quite scale properly. It's just kind of a bigger material, but no problem. We can go in here and maybe try like 15 feet. That's still pretty big, so let's try 10 feet. And I think that is getting closer, but let's just say like 8 feet. And let's break the link here because I want to make it a little bit more horizontal. That's kind of the design of this house, is a lot of horizontality. We'll go to break our link, and then let's call this 5 feet. So it gets a little more kind of squatty, I guess, on that. So looking good. All right, so I'm going to sample that material that's active, and then I'm just going to go into each one of these groups and do that paint bucket tool trick where I hold down shift, and it's going to swap out any of those materials with that new one. So I really want all of my stone to be the exact same material. The other thing I'm going to do as I go in here to each one of these groups is I want to go to Edit, Unhide, All. And you can see that I do have a shortcut for that. So I'm going to go through here, hold shift, and just kind of make sure that all of my rock is all swapped out. So I'll hit Shift H to unhide all, and then hold shift and swap those materials. So it's pretty quick and easy to do that and get this model kind of whipped into shape. Shift H and then paint. And let's see, let's go to this one and Shift H and Shift Paint. And let's see, so whoever built this one, I mean, no big deal. They just kind of used like different material names. Sometimes that happens with your geomodels. If you're using photographs and actually like match photo, you end up with kind of a handful of different textures that look the same, but maybe you could be more efficient with a repeating tileable texture. All right. Okay, so we'll go through here and knock all these out. That looks pretty good. So the idea then would be to go through, adjust all your materials, get those all whipped into shape, and then you want to go in and you'd want to make all of your windows into render-ready windows. Like they actually have a frame and a thickness. So like when I look at this, if I were to turn on my shadows, I'll go to my shadows dialog, turn those on, and then let's cast some shadows here. Like, let's see where we at. So there we go. So now you can see that these frames are casting shadows right here, and so you'll actually get some nice depth when you render this. So otherwise you would just kind of be stuck with this flat texture, and it would just kind of like look really lifeless when you render it. But again, these geomodels are great for context buildings in the background. That's a great use of a geomodel. Another use would be in Google Earth for sure. All right, so that's kind of the idea of how I would whip this model into shape. Let me go into File, Open, and go to Brightman Designs. We've got our Summer Competition tutorial, and here's our Falling Water existing. I'm going to open this one up, and let's just take a look at what we've created here. This is, I took the time to kind of go through this whole thing, and you can see I did all the windows here. These are all set up the way they should be. I've got all of my textures applied. All the lines are all the edges are unhidden, I suppose. And the other thing I did here that I didn't show you is I adjusted this waterfall. So you can see that like in the site model, I gave one texture for our water and then one texture for our waterfall. So that's really easy to do. I just kind of rounded off that waterfall because otherwise it'll look it'll look really fake when it just kind of drops straight down. So if you give it a little bit of a rolling edge on both of these falls, it looks a little bit better. All right, so this is our existing conditions model. I always save my files as author initials _ project name space dash space description. So for this one, it's built by Brightman Designs. The project name is Falling Water, and the description is that this is existing conditions. So what else do we need to do here? So you can see that the other thing we did is I can hide this building here. So our existing conditions, I've got the ability to hide our whole model, and my site is separate from my model. Now, the reason I want to do this is because I want to import the site as one piece into Lumion, and then I want to import my existing conditions building and my proposed conditions separately. That's going to allow me to do some kind of cool effects and leading in like existing conditions and then fade to proposed. So that's kind of a good tutorial for this competition, because maybe you do want to explain like how did you get from your existing conditions to your proposed conditions. So we're going to set up our model to make that possible, and I'll show you some of the tricks with Lumion using this technique. So that's really what we did with the site. Is I took this site model. You know, your site model, you're going to want to make sure that the axes are exactly the same as your model. So to do that, like this entire site piece is a component. So you can see it says edit component, and I would want to click on change axes and make sure that my axes are right here at the origin of my model, because if they're not going to import and stack in Lumion. So that's the idea, is that all of your axes need to be in the same place. Really easy to do. You just right click and choose change axes, and so like if your axes were set over here, when you go in here, you can see that the axes for this component are set there. So what I'd want to do is right click and choose change axes, and then I can set them to be right here on our origin. Oops, actually I missed my click there. I'll click change axes. We'll snap to our origin and click 3 times, and now we're good. Okay, so now the other thing you want to do here, we do have this render tab, and on the render tab, you want to make sure that your site model, the site model is turned off, because we're going to import. Shoot, you know what? I want to save this out. So let me restate that. This is our site model here. I want to right click on that and choose save as, and save that as my site. I would oftentimes put that into a folder called components, and I would just call it site. So I'd save out that site model separately, and then in my existing conditions, I want to make sure that I hide that. So I can right click on my site and choose hide, and then update my render scene. And that way, whenever I'm ready to render in Lumion, I'm going to click on the render scene and save it. That's just kind of the surefire way to know that everything's set up the way you want it to be. So we want our site turned off. I want it to maintain in this file so I can see it, but when I render this model in Lumion, I'm going to have that site turned off. And I'll explain a little bit more about that, because inevitably I'll forget to turn it off, and we'll just fix it real quick. So that's kind of how I set up these models. This is your existing conditions model, all ready to rock. As I mentioned, these models are definitely available on our tutorials page within our blog where we post these. So make sure you hop over there and grab the download, and check out the next few in this session of tutorials, and I'll show you how to take this model, turn it into your proposed conditions, make a creative design, and then ultimately throw that in Lumion and make some pretty cool stuff. So we'll catch you in the next tutorial.